listening to Talkin' Shop.
Professors and students making sense.
Today's topic is...
Why did we lose?
The one thing I want to bring up a couple of quick points. One point is we've not really wanted to criticize her. You know, for a number of reasons, people say, well, she was thrown into it, blah, blah, blah. And they also say stuff like, oh, well, they ran a perfect campaign, and they use the example of they had Taylor Swift and stuff like that. The one thing I want to say is I have never been a huge fan of her political skills. You know, Hillary had poor political skills, but was otherwise a very, 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 very good political specimen. I mean, she was very competent, and she would have been a great president. And so we kind of dismissed the fact that she wasn't a great campaigner. With Harris, I never liked the fact that when she ran for president, she did really, really, really awful the first time. She couldn't get any votes. And I was saying to people, look, when you look at her numbers, her favorability ratings, this isn't the right move to do. I was saying that in July. And she came out, gave a great convention speech, but then there were all these little problems. She didn't want to talk about the issues, kind of just wanted to do glam or glitz stuff. And it only contributed to the perception that she's really not a great campaign vehicle and maybe wasn't the best here. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not. What do you think, Lee?
Yes, I think she had a really bad hand.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent she contributed to that bad hand, I mean, I still think that Biden should have seen the writing on the wall back in 22. But you know, she was a part of that administration. She went with him, had a bad hand. But I feel like knowing what we know about how Americans felt about the economy, favorability of Biden and everything else, I would have treated this like a high risk, high reward type of campaign. And I think they treated it like be extra safe. And they kind of put her and Tim Walz in bubble wrap for big blocks of time. And I think that there were some missed opportunities. And if you have a bad moment, but you're having, you know, hundreds of moments every week, then no one bad moment kind of knocks you off. But I just felt like they were just a little too risk averse when it came to who they talked to, where they went, what they said.
Not being too critical of the campaign, though.
Well, no, I mean, I guess I'm just saying, though, if you think like 70% of Americans think we're on the wrong track and 30% have a favorable view of Biden, and people are pretty upset about this whole scenario that even got us to her, then I just say you just go for broke,
right?
Because you're probably going to lose anyways. So make it spectacular.
Let me give you what would be the other view. Here's the way I would have done this. First of all, I was a Biden fan. I want to tell you something. Biden canceled my student loans. I mean, he gave me a $40,000 break here. I was a Biden fan. I was impressed with. I was impressed with the way there's a lot of foreign policy things going on, and I thought, you know, he had foreign policy chops. I thought this was basically a foreign policy election. I realized people talking the economy. I never liked that the talk of the economy because the stock market was breaking records. You had the GDP also going, the size of the American economy going well. Even the inflation was under control. What they're upset with is their mortgage payments. These rates, the government did this strange stuff, and now the houses are priced like they're all made out of gold or something. And so they got these interest rates. So there are legitimate pocketbook issues. But here's the thing. For me, I feel the Democrats put a knife in Biden. Now, let me explain this. They should have rallied around him. Sure, he had a horrible debate night, but you say something like this. You instead of the blue media turning on him, you say something like this. Look, he had a cold, blah, blah, blah. You could debate again. You know, he's not going to do worse than that performance. He had a couple of media appearances with Stephanopoulos or whatever where he did fine. And I think because it's the regime that runs, it's the team that runs, not the personality, you're better off with your incumbent trying. And if the incumbent loses, that's okay, because now your vice president is still safe to run in a real primary where we can have see what the real differences are rather than doing any of this policy stuff on the side. Like, we didn't know she was going to be the same as Biden. They were actually selling that. She was in Michigan with an ad about Israel, which is different than in Pennsylvania. And so it looks like the Democrats are doing the policy change not in a primary but in the back of their pocket. So they're hiding it. So it would have been better to stick with Biden, rally the forces around him, don't criticize him, get him back out in the field again, wheel him back out, and let the regime run. That's the way I would have handled it. What do you think, Lee?
So one thing I think we will never know until like the books are written is how much has he slipped in the last year. There could be people in the background saying, we don't know where his health will be running a full-fledged campaign by November. And the risk just keeps getting higher. You know, with people in their 80s, like it can happen in a month's time, right? Where everything changes. So I guess that's something we'll never know versus like it was just a brutal night and they should have stuck with him. I was more inclined, well, I was persuaded a while ago that he should have been a one-term president. So that made it easier for me to root for change. But, you know, they dithered around for 3 weeks. I still don't know if like an open primary would have produced someone different who would have had a more compelling message logistically, if that was even possible. You know, in hindsight, it doesn't seem like anything is fixable outside of a time machine to fall of 22.
Even before the debate, his popularity was going down, and he's had his moments since then. I mean, the fact that you would like to stick with him, I know that he gave you the $40,000 of student loans. Evidently,
We have a compromised host. He's on the payroll.
He has had some other moments, and I don't think it was just one, but he's had other moments, the most recent one being the garbage comment, you know. To think that he could have sustained, no matter how much you're going to rally around him, you've got to get out there and press the flesh. You've got to meet with these people. And Joe is 81 years old, and he wasn't even able to sell the policies. He's actually had good policies. Like you say, the economy was doing quite well. He could never sell it. He was never out there selling the policies.
Look, the one thing I want to say, before the debate, it was about a 1-point race. And by the time you get these polls into the final home stretch, they start to look about a 1-point race. They tighten. My point is, he could have been rescued. Sure, he would have been the same old Biden. But we were playing along with the same old Biden before that debate, and those polls look pretty darn competitive. The thing about it is, the demographics, the old people liked him. He picked up more with males, and people, what they would try to say about Biden is, oh, he's too old, he can't do it, he's too old, he can't do it. The problem is he's in there and he's doing it. So the question is whether you like what's going on or you don't. It's the regime that runs. He's the regime. Popping someone out of a cake doesn't work. There's all kinds of examples where that doesn't work. And the thing that bothers me, and I will always remain bothered by this, he said it was these insiders who did it. It was Carville and these people. You know, Carville went on YouTube and he's saying things like, there's large voter dissatisfaction with both of these candidates. So why don't we change? Why don't we just give them what they want? You know, you can imagine Carville saying, let's give them what they want. And so they do. These idiots do. And these Clinton people now are 1 and 2 against Trump. It was Begala. Begala was running Hillary's campaign, and Begala said, I'm going to, show every single silly thing that Donald Trump says, and I'm going to put that on an ad. And he did, and we all laughed, and they lost. And here we have Carville and even Stephanopoulos, who's with, I think, ABC. In that interview, he tried to trip up, he was trying to trip up Biden in that interview. You got the blue media dumping on him. You got the donors, the party of George Clooney. And these people threw out their incumbent because they thought that these were personality races. And I'm sorry, I just think it was wrong. It would have been much better for Harris not to have run this election. Now she's got political problems. How's she ever going to win again? She might have been a front runner next time around. So it didn't help her.
I think the expression is like you're always fighting the last war. The lesson of 22 was democracy and Dobbs. That was the big takeaway.
Yeah.
And what's Harris doing at the end of this election? I mean, she was a much better speaker for reproductive rights, but she's traveling the country with Liz Cheney, trying to pull back these never Trump Republicans that I think are just Democrats now and have been Democrats for 8 years. But it does seem like they maybe learned some of the wrong lessons. So your theory could be right that you just needed to stick with the record and the person. On the one hand, he's a comfort, right? He's just been in politics for so long.
I don't see how you could drag, despite the fact that he gave you a $40,000 loan, I don't see how you can be realistic and say Biden could have run a campaign. He didn't have it in him. He couldn't be out there pressing the flesh daily and going from Michigan to Pennsylvania to Arizona to Nevada. He didn't do it for the 4 years when he was younger. He didn't do it while he was president. Why would you think in this compressed period of time of a presidential election, this old guy could drag himself through this? But the fact is, your thought that you stick with him, I think, it's just like Weekend with Bernie's. You didn't see that. And I like Biden. I think he's been a good president.
Oh, yeah.
But the fact is, I don't see how you could see him running a campaign. And so Harris is just a circumstantial character in the game. You couldn't pick anyone else. You can't diss that constituency. So the idea of a primary, which would be highly divisive, and then diss the most loyal constituency in the party, you got Harris. That's how you have her.
And again, it's all just Monday morning quarterback. But I think there will be a lot of discussion about those 3 weeks and what could have been done differently with the fallout from the debate. Either on Biden's side, like a clear recognition right away that he needed to step aside, because there were people like Pelosi who were like, he's going to figure it out. That's not the best strategy when time is of the essence. Yeah, and then at the same time, I remember I had a friend who was convinced that Biden was like on his deathbed. And obviously that wasn't true, right?
I think they announced him dead at one point. Some of the alternate media.
So clearly he's still here now. He definitely faded into the background as just the president and not the candidate. There was those 3 weeks where every time Stephanopoulos, the NATO summit, everybody tuned in to see how he'd perform, and that would have continued, but maybe it was an overreaction. I don't know.
You haven't mentioned the early harbinger of Dean Phillips and Ezra Klein. They told you a lot earlier, way before the debates, that Joe was a little too old to carry the water in this election.
Well, let me tell you, I was playing tennis with a friend. I like to play tennis. This was in July. They were wanting Biden to step aside. And the guy asked me, so you're a political scientist. He asked me, how would you handle that? And so I gave him my professional advice as if I were a consultant. If the Democrats came to me in that time period in July, I'd say, look, here's the way we fix this. You stick with them. No bad stories coming from the blue media. We get them out there again, do an interview. We schedule another debate, and here's what else we do. We pick a new running mate. Harris steps down. You get Gavin Newsom as the number 2 person, and you tell the public, I'm going to resign in 1 year into the term. That way he'll learn. He's going to be the coach in waiting. You get yourself a coach in waiting. Biden running with a coach in waiting. You run on the regime and you say, this is the guy that's going to take over in 2 years or whatever. When I retire, there's our coach in waiting. Now that was my advice. That's the way I would have handled it.
I think you better stick to radio announcing.
So Newsom to you was most appealing?
I didn't know. I didn't know who would be the most appealing person. Maybe it would have been Shapiro or something like that. But I would have got a coach in waiting. By the way, remember then there was a different time period. But Roosevelt ran in his 4th election, was elected in his 4th term, and they had to wheel him out, Ed, because he was the regime, and they didn't want anyone else other than him. And so
they could hide him. Can't hide him anymore.
Well, I'm just telling you, they knew he wasn't going to make it. He died a couple of months into office, and they knew that. And so I would have stuck with Biden. I would have gone with a coach in waiting, and I would have said that, we plan to transition, and I'm going to step down before the midterms of the second term. That's the way I would have handled it.
You think that would be a great campaign strategy? Vote for me because I'm going to step down in a year from now.
You're voting for you're voting for the regime. You're voting to keep the status quo in place rather than sell out the Ukrainians, rather than eliminate the income tax, rather than deport all these people. We've got a better policy program. We've got a better team, and this is the way we're going to do it. You could have helped out Harris by putting her somewhere else. Maybe put her in the Attorney General's office or something like that. And she could have said, "That's what I want." She was very supportive. By the way. I'm not knocking her skills. I'm knocking her political skills. Her inside game is apparently favorable. People say that she's good to work with. She was very supportive of Biden and very much a team player. And I think people speak highly of her in policy spaces, in the inside game. So she could have been shuffled around, put in the Attorney General's office. They bring in a coach in waiting. That's the way I would have handled the debate performance. And then he would have gone and had a better debate. The team runs, the regime runs. That's the whole point.
You are listening to Talkin' Shop. The next issue is, what did they do best?
Let's transition and quickly, because I know we've got to get the father home. Let's transition quickly. I want to talk about what the Republicans did well.
I believe what the Republican Party has effectively done, and there's a lot going on here. They've become like the anti-institutions party. And some other people have said this. I'm not in original space here, but they don't really have the cultural power. You look at music, entertainment, that whole world is all liberals with very few exceptions. And you could even say social power. I mean, I think of like the big businesses, woke Inc., I think is what Vivek calls it. That has kind of gone in a certain direction. The courts for a while were all going in some ways counter-majoritarian rules, like with gay rights when they were making moves on that. And so I do think the Republicans, and I didn't see this when it was happening in real time, but I think part of the Trump phenomena is I am going to say it, tell it like it is, and I'm going to punch these eggheads in the mouth. I'm going to question all of these institutions and their legitimacy and everything else, and tapping into this idea that you're losing your country.
That's what I was going to say. Ripping things down while saying he's going to make us great again,
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. But certain people great again, right?
Yeah,
kind of
right.
Restore an order.
And there's two things I want to mention. The first thing that I think that Trump did really, really well in this campaign is he stopped what I call his vote bleed. What always happened with Trump, and it happened like clockwork. You can look at this state, you can look at lots of states. He would run, and people who would be conservative wouldn't like him. I know all kinds of Republican conservatives who don't like him. They're usually academic types. For example, there's professors at Princeton who are Republican, but they're not Trump people. I know plenty of people, libertarian people, the establishment conservatives, the Dick Cheney people. I bet you George W. Bush doesn't like him. So these people had no real outlet. They either can convert and go be a Democrat. Some probably did do that. But most of them go off to the libertarian candidate. Most of them go off there. Trump always increased the vote total of the libertarian. Well, what happens this time, and the way that gets stopped, is they have a campaign strategy where instead of the Democrats running against Trump, they're running against the Avengers. You show up in Pennsylvania, it's Elon Musk, it's Trump, it's RFK Jr., it's Tulsi. I mean, they're like running against the magic bus. And what ends up happening is now the vote bleed is less. You look at the totals. One of the reasons why he's plus 11 in Ohio is that the Libertarian didn't get 1.5. I think the Libertarian got 0.4. The third party vote, we thought third party was going to be big in this election. Third party was nothing in this election, nothing. So what do you think about that, Lee?
Yes, I do think more will have to be done on the MAHA moment, Make America Healthy Again. At least in my world, I've seen some people who are persuaded by that, and some of that's like fallout from COVID and disagreements with school lockdowns and all of that, the vaccine mandate. So I think that is something that Trump embraced, and I think it was a mistake by Democrats to totally snub RFK Jr. I don't think you put him on the ticket by any means, but there was probably a way to keep him from being a full tilt surrogate for Trump. And I thought they were going to lose women more than they did by doing this. But they ran a campaign that was very much geared towards young men and maybe just men in general. I think somebody mentioned at that MSG event, they had like 25 speakers and maybe 4 of them were women, but Hulk Hogan, the UFC guy, Rogan, like all this kind of masculinity, maybe they've squeezed every bit out of that margin that you can. But I did think that was an interesting strategy and approach, and I'll be curious to see if that's just a route we see more Republicans take, or again, if it's just a Trump phenomenon.
The other thing the Republicans did well is you've got to give them credit. They learned how to early vote.
Yeah.
And
That tactically
really helped
was
them.
brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fewer people to be pursuing at the end. And, so interesting. There were 2 things that led me astray. One was Donald Trump saying the cheat was in Pennsylvania the week before. And I thought, you're only tweeting that if you hate your numbers, right? Your internals are really bad.
Right.
And then Stephen Miller at like 5 o'clock on Election Day tweets, "Men, we need you to get out there and vote." It was like the most desperate sounding thing. And of course, I mean, I think I've been mistaken many elections when you get kind of that 5 to 6 o'clock in terms of like how things are going. But clearly early voting in a lot of states was a good move by them.
You are listening to Talkin' Shop. The next issue is
the media and messaging.
The other thing we're seeing in this era is like the traditional gatekeepers, the debate commission, the CBS, 60 Minutes, all that is being bypassed for like Joe Rogan and Call Her Daddy and things like that.
And that's exactly very important because
Yeah.
it used to be that, and when I say used to, I'm talking like 8 years ago. I mean, used to right in the rearview mirror. It used to be that you had these media outlets, and what we would say, and what our Democratic friends would say, or even our students would say things like, "Oh, well, we're watching the media, and they're watching this alt thing," as if the Fox is the alt thing. Well, I have to tell you, what seems to exist now is these outlets, which do predominantly favor Democrats. That's the other thing. I'm a realist on this. When you watch these media outlets, especially after 2016, and these were pretty much Democratic outlets. This is now a pluralistic marketplace. Those entities don't have control to spin the news and put it in the way that they want to. There is a ton of sources out there. People are getting a lot from Twitter now. I have to be honest with you. I use Twitter an awful lot, not to tweet because my tweets are as silly as anyone else, but to get news. And it's very good for news. I mean, and so this stuff that you find out is not necessarily spun or given to you in the same way that it is on CNN. I have to tell you, one of the stories here is that media is now pluralistic as can be.
I do think what Rogan and Theo Von and these people offer, especially someone like Trump is just hanging out and he's just telling stories, and it humanizes him where the 30-second media hit is about the outrageous thing he said at the whatever rally he was just at. And so that has been smart of them, and I think that also maybe is how you build this cultish almost support. And I remember this summer I listened to, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Smartless. It's like Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and Sean Hayes, but they're all liberal, and they had Biden, Obama, and Clinton on, and it just felt more rehearsed and more platitudes. It was just like, "Mr. Biden, the world's so negative. How do you be a great president in spite of it?" It was just like so. I was like gagging, and like Rogan and Theo Von, they're not there to be like to kiss up. It's just conversational, and so I see the next candidates will be on that circuit like ASAP, because Joe Rogan gets all kinds of downloads and YouTube and everywhere, and that's going to be kind of the future. Whether or not you wow CBS early morning, like, I just don't know if it matters anymore.
I think Republicans, as Sean pointed out, Republicans have worked the media much better.
Yeah.
All of these radio shows, podcasts, etc. I think that's part of the reason they've been successful. Democrats, there is no, you would say that the networks and CNN, but they don't they're not going to raise anyone's blood pressure or get them excited. Whereas the Joe Rogan and Sean Hannity, and where they can say anything they want to say.
I know.
And they get the entertainment. They're more entertaining.
Soros just bought a bunch of radio stations, so maybe they're finally picking up my theory, which was that, hey, this stuff is working out. I think this radio stuff worked for them, Lee. I don't know if you agree, but I think it helped flip some of these states like Ohio and Florida. Mm-hmm. I think what they're doing on the radio was working. It's interesting that the Democrats now are going to invest in radio. We'll have to see how that goes. One of the things I noticed about these conservative media outlets, particularly on the radio, is there's always a theme. It's a business model that they do over and over and over again. The system is killing you, and it's the fault of these people, the liberal people. And they want to sell you LifeLock while they do that. They're also moving products in the middle of and the system is killing you. My fear about left-wing radio is it divides us. If you listen to these words and the things that it says, like what is that? What is that word for? We use the word sexism. What do they call it now? What is that word?
Misogyny.
Misogyny. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they have these words and they throw it out there, and all of a sudden, now it's not the system hurting you, it's men versus women, or it's something else going on. And the question is how to get radio or populist messages that make us all happy again, all in the same family. Mm-hmm. Barack Obama was very good at that. Bill Clinton was very good at that. Even John Kennedy was good at that. We love this place. We're going to make it great. We're all going to go together, and and it was a message of trying to be happy together rather than to be divisive. So that's going to be one of the things that liberal radio is going to have to figure out. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I do think you're right. I think that in our efforts to be careful and respectful of everyone's identity and their point of view, you can almost twist yourself in knots where you just don't say anything. And I think that has maybe happened.
Well, there was an undercurrent here. Now, the Republicans are able to sort of use these wedge cultural issues to sort of entice the working man to vote for them. So you'd have to admit then they've done very well with that. But the Democrats keep talking about the grievances of our parties and not paying attention to the working man, and the Republicans are talking about how out of step we are. Then they've done a good job. That's big. The cultural issues have been a winner for the Republicans, and our cultural issues have not been winners for us, except amongst us.
I know they made a lot of hay out of trans issues, right? And Bernie Moreno, and I'm pretty sure that shared browns for they them, and I'm for us. I think every Senate candidate was running that same ad. They were just swapping out the candidates. They also, though, another populist message is kind of the immigration and even the tariff stuff. Well, economists will say that's not careful. I think that is populist in a lot of ways, right? It just feels good to stick it to China and everything else. So that rhetorically it's been successful, but I think now we'll see whether they can govern with the Avengers or whether they'll they'll overstep in some way. Yeah.
You were talking about the cultural issues. What popped into my head is how Bill Clinton was so good at that. Because what Bill Clinton would do, he had a formula. He would speak certain themes that sounded Republican, but which should be universal. Things like, America's a great place. We love America. And when it came to the issues where they could criticize him on, whether it was gays in the military, gay marriage, he would only speak about those issues to those people and would deprioritize them. He would tell that this is what I'm for, so that he would signal that this fine, but he wouldn't emphasize it. And if it ever came around, he had a way of talking about it so that it fit into the family, that it fit into we're all together. And I have to tell you, the way he does that craft, I think we need to start thinking about that, because I think that's one of the ways out.
Bill Clinton, don't ask, don't tell, signs the Defense of Marriage Act.
Yeah.
So he was able to play a bit on both fields.
Yeah. When I was young, I remember there were certain things that I liked about Clinton, and I wish he would emphasize them more, but because I was liberal. But what I liked about it was he was charismatic. It looked like we were finally going to win because we had lost, and this guy looked like he had promise and hope. And so he would bring out this thing that he would do, and people like me, I was liberal back then, we would wait. And say, oh, there it is. He said it. Like I found it. It's at the bottom here. He's for us. So I think that the way that gets done, and then to look at that again, what they lead with. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the challenge for, you say, I think you're right. Bill Clinton could kind of let everybody know they were important, but also know how to, speak to different groups. And
remember,
can you do that in a 24/7 news cycle?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot harder than just, he was in Erie and the local papers pick it up and the New York Times has a little bit, but there's no blogger saying you won't believe who he doesn't care about. Yeah, it's tough.
All right, guys, is there anything else that we've left out? Anything else you want to say? We're all good?
Yeah.
I want to thank the guests for being here, and I specifically want to invite Lee back here. Lee, come back here and sit with us.
All right.
Especially when we have students too. I know.
Yeah.
I think it would be fantastic if we have the students here, and you could be here with us on occasion. I know that you got young kids and so forth, so you got to get home. We record late, but we really thank you for making this effort. It's really been
Yeah, it
great.
was a good time.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to it.
It's good to have you here.
All right, guys, and that's a wrap.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
You are listening to Talkin' Shop.
Professors and students making sense.